Hello, Mayflom here. Today we're talking about making a batch of cards. You're going to need some watercolor paper, a floral stamp, or other scenic stamp that you can color simply, as well as some book paper or another type of paper is fine as well. Maybe some pattern paper that has some words on it, some color mediums, and some sentiment stickers or sentiment stamps. Very flexible. So the first thing I do when I want to work with something, but I'm not sure what, I have this Dina Wakley stamp and I stamped it twice. There are two different variations of the same floral stamp. And I'm just coloring it with some clean color markers and water. This part, very, very simple. This is a medium I've used a lot. This is a medium I like for my card making. Watercolors would work. I mean, anything you've got will work here. I'm just using a water brush here to spread the color around, and I'm just playing with loose florals. I thought I had an idea, but I wasn't sure, so I just have my full piece of watercolor paper. Now I'm going to chop this in 4 so that it's 5.5 by 4 1/4, and I'm going to make 4 cards because I have a bunch of card making to do. And I find that working in a batch like this, when I have a bunch of something to make, it does a couple of things. Number one, it gives me a baseline starting point for my creativity. Here's where I'd like to start. And here's where I'd like to get to. And here's a whole bunch of opportunities. So there's no pressure on any one project when I make like this, because I'm just making and creating a whole bunch of things here. So there's no pressure on it. There's no expectation. If one of them doesn't turn out, recycling bin and goodbye. Not a big deal. I'm very free to just color and play and experiment. And if I like it, we use it. And if I don't, we don't. Not any pressure. And I cannot stress this enough why I like batch creating in this way, because it means that without that pressure, then I don't have those doubts in my mind. I don't have those voices in my head telling me, not good enough, terrible. Nah, we're just working on it. And for example, here is a piece of that paper and there was a little bit on it. So I went and got some book paper to cover this up. Now, if you have pattern paper with words on it or any other kind of pattern paper pale enough to stamp on, as you can see, I've got my big stamp here and I'm going to try this and see how that goes. I'm going to stamp onto the book paper. So the stamp is not actually going to be perfectly visible. It's pretty visible, but it's not as perfect as if I had a white piece of paper. But it's using up that watercolor paper and it's going to work. It's going to work well, actually, which I wasn't sure about. But that's the whole point here. We're trying different things, slight variations, and seeing, okay, well, what happens if I use these markers? What happens if I go get my Dina Wakley pastels and use those on these stamps? Well, I'll tell you, what happens is success. We're going to like what happens. What happens if I work with it with the paper wet versus the paper dry? We can answer all of these questions while creating, and what's going to end up happening here is we're going to end up with at least one thing we really like. Typically, if I make a batch of 3 or more, I will like at least one thing. And I'm getting, by the way, these scribble sticks, they work best when I dip them in water. So when you see me leave, I am dipping it in water and then coming back for more. Now, there's a lot we can do here. There's a lot we can play with. And I find that freeing myself up to just play, just see what happens. What that ends up doing for me is it really gets into better creativity because I'm not pressuring myself. This is the one. So for that reason alone, I like the batch creating. Also, note that if you make this batch and only 2 of them look like they should be cards and other ones look like maybe you should chop them up or use them as ephemera for something else, well, then do that. What you see me doing here is using some gold spray, as well as there's a gold watercolor right there that you can see that I'm just going to scoop some up and flick it on the same as you might a spray. Use what you've got, stretch your supplies. These are all really good things. Test what you have. How do scribble sticks work with watercolors? How do gold metallic watercolors work with clean color pens? I mean, there's on and on and on. We have so many options here. And here, as you can see, all I have done, I did add a little bit of stitching on there around the edges, mostly to support the book paper, but it can be for any reason there. And I'm just picking out, I have some Tim Holtz stickers, And I'm picking out sentiments that feel fairly general but supportive and uplifting, and I'm putting them on. I like them all, so guess what? They are all going to be cards. They are all going to be mounted on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card base and done as cards. If ever I fall in love with one so completely, I can frame it. I can hang it on the wall. If I don't love one, can I chop it up and use it for parts? You betcha. It's all about letting yourself get creative, going ahead and taking those creative risks and putting yourself in a place where there isn't a bad, there isn't a problem, there is no worst case scenario. Create, enjoy the process, and I'd love to see what you make.